Give us a word, O Lord. Amen.
Amen.
This passage that we hear read from the Old Testament today, from Daniel, is a passage that many of us are familiar with. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Maybe you were told this story for the first time as a young child, like I was in Sunday school. Maybe if you were of a certain age, you were introduced to it in Veggie Tales. Yes, some of you are nodding along. Maybe you know the songs still as well. This story is presented generally as a story of excellent faith. These three young men go into a furnace and are willing to die for their faith, or at least this is how it was taught to them. Willing to die for their faith. Great guys, do what they do. Cheerio. And I want to question that a little bit today. I think that this story is a little more meatier than just that. It has a little more to give us. I want to hang on this one thing that I remember from the story that stands out. Their response to Nebuchadnezzar. They are in front of this idol, and Nebuchadnezzar tells them, bow down or you'll be cast into this furnace. They've probably seen other people cast into this furnace, right? This is not a furnace that is like the cast iron stoves that were in houses of my youth in my grandmother's house that you could kind of get around. It probably was iron, maybe. Let's just say it was. But it's massive. It's very large in a room, and it likely has a grate in front where Nebuchadnezzar and all of his prefects, all of his governors, are able to watch his enemies, or just the people that don't do what he wants them to do, burn in front of them. This giant room likely smells of burned hair, burned flesh. It's not a nice place. It's an instrument of torture. It's an instrument of death. And the three young men, as they are talking to Nebuchadnezzar, they have this line that stands out to me. If our God is able to save us, if our God is able to save us, he will save us. If our God is able to save us. That to me does not sound like a statement of faith that is super strong. That's on a really good foundation. If God is able to. Yeah, he might. I'm hopeful. It's hot. If God is able to save us, he will save us. And I don't know about y'all, but I feel like it really humanizes these three young men. How many of us have felt that we might have questioned the faithfulness of God in our own life, in our own call, going away to seminary, hopefully being ordained? This questioning, this questioning really humanizes them for me, and I want to hang out there. I want to complicate the story a little with that. And as they are lowered into the furnace, they are bound. They are bound with chains, they are bound with cords, with leather straps. They can't move. And they are bound together, these three young men, all together. And as they are lowered into the furnace, Nebuchadnezzar stands up, and he's like, hey, wait, I thought we put three of them in there. And there's a fourth. Mm-hmm. And so despite this, I hope God will save us. If God is able to, God will save us. God meets them there in the furnace. God meets them there in their chains. God meets them there as they are bound and as they are in a place that is very, very hot. St. Jerome has a reading of this text that I really enjoy, and I think it's helpful for us. St. Jerome has, as he's writing his commentary on Daniel, he has, on the one hand, the Hebrew and Aramaic texts of the Old Testament, and then he has the Septuagint Greek texts on the other hand. And as he's writing his commentary, he goes, it's interesting, this fourth person that shows up. My Hebrew texts say it's a person that looks like a god, or a god. My Greek text says it could be a son of God. And Jerome does what we modern Christians are hesitant to do at times when we're reading the Old Testament. He finds Jesus right there, and he says, it's got to be Jesus. Jesus is in the furnace. Christ is in the furnace with these men. And that's a reading I want to lean into. Christ in this furnace with these three young men. The canticle that we read today, Canticle 13, is not a section that we have in our Bible in our text. It is in the Septuagint. And it's the song that these men are singing as they are in the furnace. It's kind of in this, we just don't have it in our Bible. But the song that they sing as they are in the furnace, going from this place of being bound by chains and bound by cords to a place where they are singing. Who can do that but our Messiah? Who can do that but Christ? Christ meets them there. God meets them there in the furnace. And the chains that bind them, these chains of insecurity, of doubt, of fear, are burned away. They are walking, they come out. How are these chains burned away? Not by the fire, says St. Jerome, but Christ. Christ is the one who burns these chains and burns these cords away from them and lets them live a new life. Christ meets them where they are. And so today, my prayer for us is that as we are able to connect with these three young men, with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that they are more human to us, these pillars of faith, because I do think they are pillars of faith. And that as Christ meets them there, I hope that you remember that Christ meets us where we are. St. Jerome reads the Old Testament, and Christ meets him in every passage. Wow, that's so beautiful. Christ meets him in every passage he reads. And so, today, I want to push back against this idea that Christ will meet us if we do something. Christ will meet us if I'm at the daily office every day. Christ will meet me if I'm, there's where the sacristan is. We want a little more people. Christ will meet me if I'm able to sing well. If Christ will meet me if I do all the right things and have it all together. And that's not it, y'all. Christ will meet you everywhere. And Christ will meet you and burn away the chains and the bonds that hold you. Thanks be to God. Amen.